Welcome to BizSequel Mao. I'm David and this is ProCam 7. Now, you might have surmised that ProCam 7 is the 7th iteration of the wildly popular ProCam app. I mean, this thing is so popular that it has a 4.6 out of 5 from 30,000 ratings on the App Store. People like their ProCam. To find out what all the fuss is about, I went to Lim Dam, which is a dam in Lim. ProCam 7 is a multifunctional advanced camera app like the Moment app that offers a variety of shooting modes. This thing does stills, video, slow shutter, time-lapse, night mode, burst mode, portrait mode, a new 3D mode. It's like, Jesus, this is going to be a long review. And depending on which phone you have, you may find that some modes perform differently or just don't exist entirely. So for example, my iPhone XR misses out on the 3D mode, and my first generation SE misses out on 3D mode and portrait mode. But judging from the advertisements for the new 3D mode, I'm really not missing out on anything of substance or value at all. So to be honest, I really don't care. ProCam 7 has the word Pro in its name, so I shall judge it as such. But just cramming as many modes as you can in as possible doesn't make an app pro. Pro also means efficiency. How quickly and easily can I access different functions so that I can react to what's going on around me? I'm also looking at optimization and consistency. I want a well-balanced and well-rounded app where each mode performs well enough to justify its place. I don't want to see gimmicks 3D mode or empty modes that don't work properly just tacked on for the sake of it. So let's see what's what, starting with stills mode. Now on the surface, it might seem easy to label ProCam 7's stills mode as being overly complicated, but for someone like me who shoots in RAW and likes access to manual controls, ProCam 7's stills mode is, in a sentence, the most ergonomically laid out stills mode in any advanced camera app I've ever used. There's no wasted space or wasted movement. Everything is right here on the screen to help you get the composition, the exposure and the focus that you want as quickly and as accurately as possible. I don't have to scroll and nothing is hidden away. Even on my little first generation iPhone SE with its little 4.5-inch screen, everything is just right there in both landscape and portrait. But landscape is where this thing shines through the most because you can use just one thumb to adjust everything. And while the screen can't display a raw file preview, there's just too much information. I really find the live histogram and the overexposure warnings are extremely useful, and there's also a comprehensive bracketing option for times when the exposure range is just too great. Now, aiding composition, you get a choice of grids and levels. Now, even the golden ratio is here, and nothing says Pro quite like the golden ratio. And if anyone can tell me how my old company logo relates to the golden ratio, then I don't have anything to give you. I'll give you a shout out. How about that? Finally, autofocus is fast and reliable in most situations. You can lock it in place, and of course you can focus manually, and you have this little bubble to help you with peaking as well. But if you find that little bubble gets in the way, then thankfully you can just turn it off in the settings. And everything I've described here so far just really adds up to an efficient, functional and fun shooting experience. I found myself being able to get my settings a lot faster, so I can just get my shot and move on much more quickly, which is something that I really appreciate. I love photography, but I really hate just staying there for ages, just trying to open different menus and find the settings I want. With ProCam 7, everything is right there, right where I need it to be. So what about video mode? Well, take a look at this short video I made with ProCam 7, and then after you've watched it, I'll tell you all about what it's like to use. Now, all the shots that you're going to see were taken with ProCam 7, apart from the very first one with the sign, and then there's a couple in there with me and my wife Roxy in. Enjoy. I love making videos with my phone. I really, really do. I definitely want to do it more often. But will I be using ProCam 7? Well, to make that kind of video that you just saw, to make the videos that I want to make, my video mode wish lists includes manual exposure controls, which includes white balance, and I need instant access to them. I can't be searching through menus every time I want to change the ISO. Good continuous autofocus that's not going to hunt, and the ability to lock the focus and some video stabilization. I'd probably throw 4K at 24 and 60 frames per second in there as well, because I've really gone off 1080p on phones. I just don't like how it looks. Especially in kind of low light situations like in the trees, you can just see a load of digital noise just flickering around there. It just doesn't happen in 4K. So all that said, video mode on ProCam 7 is good. It really is. I've got everything on my wish list and I've enjoyed using it. You have a lot of resolutions and frame rates to choose from, certainly the most I've seen, including VGA for some reason. So if you want to shoot in VGA, then ProCam 7 is the app for you. And you can still access all of the manual controls, although they're not on the screen permanently like they are in stills mode. So I would like them to stay fixed there, just because I found pressing the little M just a little bit fiddly. And for some reason you lose peaking in manual focus, which makes focusing yourself that much more difficult. Now the autofocus is limited but smart, I would say. You can tap anywhere on the screen to focus as you'd expect, but it's not continuous, it's fixed there, so if you move the camera or something moves in front of it, it's not going to refocus. There is continuous autofocus, but for some reason it only works right in the center of the frame. You can tap to refocus during the actual recording, and it is a smoother transition of focus than in the stills mode, so sometimes it does look quite good, but it's not always a feasible option if you don't have a hand free to do that. Something I didn't expect when I first picked up ProCam 7, but something that I really like and appreciate, is how you get an aspect ratio overlay. This is really cool because when I'm shooting with my iPhone's native 178 or 16:9 aspect ratio, I can actually compose with a 235 overlay, so I don't accidentally cut anything out of the frame when I crop into 235 later. Now, if you've watched me before, then you might know that I do own a couple of these. And of course, when I'm using my anamorphic lens, I don't have to crop into 235 because the anamorphic lens is going to squeeze the frame for me. Now, unlike the Moment app, which has the option to de-squeeze an anamorphic lens automatically, you can't do that in ProCam 7, but to be honest, it hasn't bothered me at all because I can easily de-squeeze the footage in Final Cut Pro later anyway. Something else which massively affects whether or not I use an app is stability. Not how stable the video is, it's how robust is it. Does it freeze or crash a lot, for example? And I'm mentioning this in the video section specifically because I found video mode is the most unstable mode in other advanced camera apps, particularly in 4K and at high frame rates. So I'm pleased to report that for me, using an iPhone XR, ProCam 7 has been by far the most stable advanced camera app that I've ever used. Now, full disclaimer, I've actually been using ProCam since ProCam 5 back in 2017, and I can count on one hand how many times the app's frozen or crashed in that time. But surprisingly, the main thing that I took away, the main confirmation of its stability, is how it handles screen recorder running in the background. You see, screen recorder is an extremely processor intensive task, and when it's running in the background along with an advanced camera app, I often find that I just max out my iPhone XR's RAM, which just causes the app to crash and the screen recording to fail. And this has become so common that I'm actually used to it, so I was really surprised that it didn't happen a single time with ProCam 7. So because it has everything on my wish list and because it's so stable, I would definitely be sticking to ProCam 7 for video. But what about the other modes? Well, if you're looking at ProCam 7 for stills and video at the level that I've been reviewing them at, then it's definitely a top performer and I enthusiastically recommend it. But when it comes to the other modes, unfortunately, ProCam 7 gets drastically outperformed by its competition, particularly the Moment app. Timelapse. Now, Timelapse does exactly what it says on the tin. In fairness, it takes time lapses at various intervals, resolutions, and frame rates. You also get manual controls, but again, the manual focus doesn't have focus peaking, and there's an option for HDR, but that's about it. So if that's all you need, then go for it. You know, Procam 7 is the app for you. You'll be very, very happy with the right location. You can create some really cool and impressive time lapses. Now, I'm not after a fully featured, fully specced out time lapse mode like Skyflow or something like that. But after using the Moment app, which also offers motion blur and light trails, you can take time lapses in the more mundane locations and turn them into something far more visually interesting. So Procam 7 has a lot to catch up on when it comes to time lapses, although I do like how you can reduce the screen brightness to save battery. That's pretty cool. What about slow shutter or long exposure mode? Well, I suspect that the reason that Procam 7 doesn't offer motion blur time lapses is because it can't actually blur motion very well. And that is no more evident than in slow shutter mode. The blur effect in all situations just doesn't look as good as the Moment apps. Now, water is passable, they are comparable, like at a distance, but with clouds, they just look horrendous. They look like someone's just scratched the frame. Now, in fairness, light trails do actually look alright, but the trick here is to open the manual controls and select a really slow shutter speed. If you leave the app to its own devices, then it will often select a shutter speed that's far too fast. And instead of getting one smooth continuous line, you'll get a series of dots and dashes, which just looks like Morse code. Now, surprisingly, low light is actually the best bit about the slow shutter mode. And I've heard people making a big deal out of it with the iPhone 11. I mean, people seem to really care about their low light photos. But me, with my iPhone XR, I don't have, obviously, the ability of the iPhone 11 to create the low light photos. But if you have a tripod and use the right settings, then the low light mode actually performs really, really well and could be an option for you if that's something that you want to create and you don't have the iPhone 11. So take a look at this image of this Pisikuts frumos, which means beautiful little cat in Romanian, because of course it does. You can see at a 4-second exposure time, it's actually produced a great looking image, and most importantly, it's maintained the details both in the cat and in the wall behind it. Another great option for low light photos is Pro Cameras, not to be confused with Procams, Pro Cameras Low Light Plus mode, which is actually a £3.99 in-app purchase. And yes, Pro Cameras Low Light Plus does look better than Procam 7's Low Light, but credit to Procam 7 for performing comparably with a mode that's just built in as standard. Now, this low light mode isn't to be confused with the dedicated night mode, which unfortunately just consistently in various tests just produced a mushy mess. So I shall just say avoid and move on to burst and portrait mode. Burst mode is fine, like, it does what it says, but I'm not sure why it's its own mode. It doesn't have any settings or anything like that. So instead of having its own mode, it could just be an option for the shutter button to, if you just hold it in stills mode, it's gonna take burst photos when you're in JPEG. Or you could put it as a format option in between HDR and bracketing, something like that. The same goes for portrait mode. Now, I like portrait mode a lot. I like taking portrait mode photos, and in Procam 7, yes, they do work really well, both on human and non-human subjects. And Procam 7 also allows you to do some really cool editing afterwards, like remove the background. But again, it shouldn't be its own mode. It should just be an option in between, like bracketing and HDR. There's so much space between bracketing, HDR, RAW and TIFF, then you could easily fit burst and portrait in there. And that is all of the modes, finally. But now I know that that is not every single thing that Procam 7 can do. But trust me, I've been through the app with a fine-tooth comb and used all of the features. And if I've not mentioned something, it's because 1, I don't think it's worth mentioning, or 2, This review is already long, and if I mention every little thing that ProCam 7 can do, I mean, this isn't a walkthrough. The review would most certainly last about 3 days. So in conclusion, the stills mode is the most functional and most efficient stills mode on any advanced camera app that I've used. The video mode is also very comprehensive and extremely stable, but the other modes feel like characters in an Avengers film. They're there and they do things, but they're not exactly fleshed out. If I was the app developer, I would focus, consolidate, and just get rid of some of the fluff that comes with ProCam 7. I'd make portrait and burst mode into part of the stills mode. I'd completely go back to the drawing board with motion blur, while low light and light trails would replace the night mode. I would get rid of all of the UI color and timestamp and location stamp options that just take up a load of space in the settings. And I would do all this instead of wasting my time with gimmicks like 3D mode. And that's my review of ProCam 7. Let me know in the comments below what you'd like me to review next, and if you'd like a tutorial or a how-to on anything that I've gone over in this video, then again, just let me know. And if I get enough requests, then I will be happy to take a look. So thank you so much for watching, take care, and as always, Becca Dund.